Okay, everybody, good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back. And going to do a little more Bitcoin valuation work today based on the power trend. I've played around with this metric for a while on my own. I haven't recorded this, but I've been thinking about it for the past few weeks because when I talk about the power curve and this beautiful relationship that Bitcoin has with time, of course, it also has a relationship between hash rate and addresses, or prices and hash rate. Those relationships exist as well. But when you just look over time and you look at the price, obviously we have the beautiful power curve. And often when I speak about it, I'm trying to manually talk about the change in price each day. And I figured it'd just be easier to show you on the chart. And I've been looking at it, for a while now, recently, I should say, not too long. And it actually, if you break down the tranches of how the power curve looks over time, and it involves the daily price changes versus the monthly versus the annual price changes, you can even get a little bit of a valuation range going. So I'll show you exactly what I mean here. I'm going to do it today. So this is the old power curve, right? 96% R squared, looking pretty good. And as we talked about yesterday, I think we're moving into more exciting times with this, where the price is now above trend. Okay, this was a long time in 2024, from last spring basically to this past fall. The old election day, after election day, it went over trend, but then it fell back down even through a little bit of the winter here. But this period in particular seemed like it was taking a long time to get back above trend compared to prior cycles. But now that we've broken through 1, 2, 3 times in the last year and a half, I think we're into more exciting times. And as I've always said, this model does have predictability, but it's exciting when you start to see the trend line go back up, because when it starts to go back up a little bit, and each day it's above, each day this price closes above the black line, it will pull the model back up. Then that bodes, better for the future when we try to predict out. So we're above it. Trend line as of yesterday is 101,396. Price 105,615. But look at the trend line number. Okay, 101,396. Sometimes when I just talk and I'm doing these videos, I'm like, okay, so the daily change in that is what? As you see here, almost $100. If we look from yesterday till today, I don't have the price data today, unfortunately, feeding in. I'll get that shortly, the live action. But if we look yesterday to today, 101,396,000 to 101,495,000. It's roughly $100 change. So let's start to display this on the chart. Okay. So this is going to be number 1 here. And this is the daily price change over time. Okay. It's this number. So this is on the right axis now. Okay. Just as we talked about, we're at, not exactly $198 change on a daily frequency. Okay. So that's what you're looking at with the number 1. Now let's just go back and see how this has changed over time. Okay. So let's go back to 2011. It was a matter of cents. The trend line itself changing a matter of cents. We didn't get to $1 until 2014 even. After that trend line was pulled up over the 2013 double boom, $200 down to 60, back to 1200 or so. The power trend starts changing, in increments of $1 each day, increasing $1 each day from 2014. Okay, and let's just from here zoom in, because we'll go out to 2050 later. So we go out here 2016, 2017. What about during the 2017 boom? The power trend was only changing $5 a day, only. Okay, the trend itself was $3,000. And obviously we're way over trend at this point when we were, this is about, I think December 16th was when we hit, I can't see it on my frequency, but, we hit 20,000, right around this time, mid-December 2017. Six x over trend. So that's a very rare error, of course, as I've talked about many times. But let's just look at the change in the trend. $6 a day. And then, of course, even as the price retreats, the power trend is still moving higher because the price, the green B there, is above the black line. And then here we start bear market interrupted by a 2019 summer boom. But generally, we're pulling the trend back down here. But regardless, as you see, both the trend line and the daily change in the trend price is increasing. All right, so in 2017, we're at $6, $5. Let's look at the next top. 2021, the trend line is increasing $25 a day now. Okay, and by the end of 2021, $30 a day. Again, we go here. Trend line slows down a little bit, but still going to increase. And we get back to our $100 a day. So this is where we are right now, $100 a day in the power curve change. So again, just what you see here in this purplish dotted line is the daily change in the black line, which is the trend. So it gives us a smooth sort of understanding of where, what Bitcoin does. And as always, when we talk about this trend line, and what I see in this trend line is adoption. I don't necessarily see liquidity or ETFs adopting it or Trump coin or whatever. This is a network that's being adopted. It has a lot of features of a network. It's global, uncensorable, censorship resistant, I should say. And this is how it's growing. Now let's look at the monthly change and see how that looks, okay? For the monthly change, well, I'll leave on the power trend, okay? So number 2 here is the monthly change. This sort of greenish, turquoise-ish line, number 2. Right now, what is it? It's about a little under $3,000 a month. That in itself, if you can't sort of think about how much $100 a day is, think about a month. The trend line of the Bitcoin price action goes up nearly $3,000 a month. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin is going to go up $3,000 a month, but that's what the trend does, and it's a great trend line. You can see it fits very well. Just use the eye test. Remember, the trend line is the black line. Just slices right through most of the price action. Yes, the old crypto winter was below it all the time, but all the peaks nice and above it, and we're moving nice and above it now. Although, as we've said, and as I talked about a lot yesterday, and everybody knows, we're probably going to have a less extreme top this time, like compared to the other times, and that's, I think, indicative of all the prior tops. This one looked really extreme if you look at it, and it was, almost 8 times over the trend line at the time. Back in 2011, 2013, that extreme was a little bit damper, but not much. 2017, damper, and then you can see more tempered tops in 2021. No one knows what's going to happen now, this cycle, if these 4-year cycles hold, but we presume that it's going to be a little bit more damp. So anyway, monthly change in the trend back in 2012 would be $1. The first time it went over $1 was 2011, 2012, right? A $10 monthly change in the trend as we moved into the 2013 top, 161 monthly change in 2017 for the trend, 750 or so in the first top, 2021 second top, $900 per month. Okay. Now let's do yearly. Looking at the right-hand axis here, right-hand axis. Let's look at today. Okay, so just to remind you what you're looking at here. Power trend price, 101,000. Oops. Can I get 101,500 as of today, May 20th. So if we go back a year to May 20th, 2024, it's going to be 70,000. Right? It's going to be 101,000 minus that monthly trend change, which is number 3. All right, so let's just go back to May 20th, 2024. And there it is, 67,900. Okay. And it continues on. So back in the early booms, all right, the yearly change, a lot of uncertainty for Bitcoin, not a lot of adoption. Certainly a lot of people that cared about it were arguing vociferously on the direction of scaling. But the yearly change in the trend, only $70. 2017 top, what was the yearly change? A bit more, $1,500. Right? It's something that just seems, like a pretty decent expected return, considering that the price was 1,000 at the start of 2017. Right? The Bitcoin price, trendline price as well. Let's look at the 2021 top, about $7,000. All right, that is the change in the black line on a yearly basis, a yearly frequency. Now, there's a few things to talk about. Let's reset the zoom. Let's not go all the way out to the crazy, numbers in 2050. But as you remember, I've talked about, I think in 10, 15 years, we'll really start to threaten or challenge or overtake the global financial system. But let's just look at 2030. Look at how these numbers look then. All right. The power trend is $550. And remember, that has since come down because I've been talking about this for a long time. But let's say, if you recall, in the last 2 years, this thing was closer to 600,000 2 years ago, the trend line. This just shows you how the trend line changes. The black line, looking at the data from January 3rd, 2009 until 2 years ago, the power trend was sitting at 600,000. But because we've pulled that data down, right? Just to show you exactly what I'm looking at, and just very simple, look at the price. We've pulled this black line down because of all this price action below the line. All right, when we pull back out, let's just go here. And we look at 2030, end of the decade, which is really the start of the next decade. End of the decade is 2029, but whatever. We look at December 31st, 2030. Now it's down to 550,000. So this is just how it goes. It goes up and down based on the price action. But it's exciting again because we're going to start pulling this back up. And I think getting back to 600,000 is probably a good number based on what I recall from the prior trend lines. It's a separate analysis. We can get to that later, but it's going to be pulled back up. It's going to be pulled back up as we stay above trend now, going into the future, presumably. But let's look at the daily trend out here. somewhere around 2030. Okay, it doesn't really matter where, but $400. All right, so 4 times higher than it is today. Daily trend change, which in itself is interesting because look at the trend line is 550,000. That's 5.5 times higher than it is today. So these things are not linear extrapolations. So it's the daily change in the trend, $400 per day by the end of the decade, start of the next decade. Let's look at the monthly change. 12,000. 12,000 a month. Where was it here? 3,000. 4 times higher. Okay, again, interesting. It's not linear. And now yearly. Yearly change. End of 2030, roughly $130,000 change in the trend over the course of a year. Okay, so you look at that $550,000 trend line. Let's look at it back to December 2039. It's going to be $130,000 lower, roughly. And yes, it is $420,000. So this is how it looks. Now, this is the exciting thing, the interesting thing, is I was looking at these and I was like, these are actually some interesting bands. How can I do a little valuation metric with these bands? And I said, well, let's overlay the actual daily trends, because daily is obviously where all the action is. People get excited. People declare Bitcoin dead. Let's look at that. So let me take the trend off because it becomes a lot of noise. All right, taking the actual trend itself off. Now we're just looking at the change in the trend over time. Okay. Let's see if we can overlay something that could create a valuation metric. And here we go. So this is the same. This is the change in the actual price over the course of a day. All right, so we're still on this price change axis here. Looking at the green now, this green. This is kind of interesting. First thing to notice, let's zoom in just in this period, okay? Looking at the green, there's a bunch of gaps, you see, okay? Sometimes it's gapping to nothing. Why is that? Because the daily change is going negative, okay? Happens. Nothing in this world is 100% R squared. Nothing in this world will go exactly along the trend line. And certainly plenty of days Bitcoin closes lower than where it closed the day before. Those are the negatives. You can't plot negative on log scale. So they just come up as blanks. But that's okay. That's okay. What I'm looking for is the action compared to the smooth daily changes. It's really interesting because it's kind of a pretty good valuation metric. Just looking at trend line daily, trend line monthly, and then trend line yearly changes. Anytime the daily change gets as high as the yearly on the trend, it calls a top. So we see it here in 2011. We see it here in the first top in 2013, and we see it here in the second top of 2013. Every time, and I know it's harder to see that green line because it's if I'm on the thing and I'm not touching a dot, there we go. Don't worry about the tooltip at the moment. Just look at the green sort of hashes there. Anytime the daily actual change in Bitcoin price is above the yearly trend change in price, that's usually a pretty screaming moment. Okay, so here, for example, the daily change in November 2013 in price is $121. It was roughly $1,000 the day before, November 28th, November 29th. It's $1,128, or a daily change of $121. The trend itself would only change $70 over the course of the year. And this happens to signal a top. Pretty interesting. Let's not worry about the bottoms at the moment. Let's just look at the next top. 2017. Did it signal? Yes, it did. Let me try to find it. December 6th, 2017. Okay, it's not the exact top. True. Actually, let me zoom in because this was the top day. Yeah, it's still hit it. $19,000 price. This probably closed at 20,000, above 20,000 on some exchanges. My data no, but whatever. Hit 20,000 for sure. But the close 19,640. The daily change there is nearly $2,000. That's more than the yearly trend change at the time of $1,500. Okay, so we're moving well ahead of what trend would project over the course of a year. Happens to be a top. But this is a very volatile thing, right? So it's like the next day you even go negative. It's a different kind of an indicator. But you are closing many days above the yearly action of what the price trend would tell you. Does it touch it for 2021? That's the key, because a lot of my metrics don't do that. Almost. This one, I think, is the closest, if I recall. Let me zoom in. Yeah, this one does. So in February 8th, 2021, as we're moving, it's not the top. It's not the top price, but we're getting there. $46,000 Bitcoin price. That's a daily change of 7,000. So it's a huge change, obviously. Daily close. What's the yearly trend change? $6,900. All right, so obviously this is way over the daily change of the trend. It's $20, or the monthly change, $680. That's number 2 there. But number 3 is where, that's like you're shortening time. I'm thinking of APSK, great follow on Twitter. He does some great videos like this. He's kind of modeled some of this out with valuation of the market cap over time, like kind of taking the trend line of the market cap 4 years in the future and doing some interesting videos on that. I'm not sure if he's done exactly this, what I've done, but anyway. You're taking what you would expect in the future, you're bringing it to the present. So let's look, for example, when does the trend line day hit $6,920 change on the day? Well, that's well into the future, because what is in 2021? What is the daily change of the trend right now in 2025? We just talked about it. It's only $100, and the price action on the day in February 8th, 2021 was 7,000. All right, so that's just to show you how we're taking it. Future price action, and we're sort of bringing it to the present with our overvaluation, so to speak. So again, it's a good top signal, or at least close to the top in 2021. And then I'll answer that question: when does the daily trend hit 7,000 roughly? Because that was the yearly trend in 2021. But let's just go again to today just to see where we are now. We're right in range. Okay, and it seems like, to talk about what is in range, if you're between the daily trend change and the monthly trend change, most action hits that. And again, it goes negative plenty of days. That's when you have no data. But when we do have data, it's right between, say, the daily and the monthly close. But just to answer our question on the most recent one, because I think this is more interesting, is so here in February 2021, where is it? Might not catch it now. Got to zoom in more. This one. We had a daily actual change in price of $7,000, closed $7,000 higher than the day before. That's a yearly trend in 2021. But let's think about when the trend line daily would hit that. That's number 1. So let me take off these just to not confuse, and even take off this. We want to find out when this number is actually 7,000. And then we see how much Bitcoin performed, like how much of the future Bitcoin took back to the present in 2021 based on the growth of this network. Let's zoom it out. Let's count out to when it's $7,000. somewhere like there. So that's a wild sort of thought, but that's how, markets can be that crazy. But this was 45, 47 years that Bitcoin was performing at that level, ahead of time back in 2021. Very interesting. All right, so we put these back again. Okay. It's always sort of discounting ahead, we can see, because it's usually above the trend line daily, say. But usually is probably not the right word. I don't actually know the frequency because there's plenty of negative days where it's under that. Okay, so just a little caveat there. But if you're comparing it to the yearly, it shows a nice little band, a nice little top. And so I would suspect if we keep an eye on this model, and it comes, it came quick and it didn't last long. Maybe I'd need to, take semi-annually or 9 months, whatever that frequency might be, as a new band, just to, because it's clearly elevated here, obviously, as you would expect it to be, as we're running to new highs. But it only hits the number 3 once here in 2021. It hit it more, I think, actually not too much more. A couple more days more in 2013, maybe a few more days, not many more days in 2017. But it's a very interesting top metric, actually. So I would suspect. So this is very interesting. Now let's assume that the Bitcoin daily actual price at the end of 2025, at least for one day, could hit the yearly change of the trend line. That would mean that presumably at one point leading up to the end of this year or maybe into next year, the Bitcoin price is going to rise $35,000 in one day. That's what it's done, at least for one day in each of the prior cycles. And I'll probably need to put another line on, just, I don't know, maybe we'll just see what kind of works. 9 months would give us a little bit better data, but it only really touched it at this point right here, February 8th. You could say, this point, February 19th, it went up 4,000 compared to this one, it went up 7,000. That's probably like a 9-month figure of the trend, but it did hit it. It did hit it. A daily change did hit it at that point. So if this idea holds, then by the end of 2025, we're going to have at least one day or a couple days where we get over $30,000 on a close. It's also important to remember because it goes negative as well. So it could be that it goes up 30,000 and the next day it goes down 40,000. Could you imagine the Malox moments that grandma has after giving her grandchildren some money to invest in Bitcoin in November 2025? So that is mostly what I wanted to show here today. It's a little bit of a new valuation metric. It's kind of weird. It's harder to think about, right? But what we're doing is we're just comparing the daily price change with different frequencies of how this trend line grows. And it should be able to maybe help us prepare for the real Malox moments that will be coming by the end of this year. So let me know, guys, if you want me to look at anything else. I have another chart here on the S&P and the 10-year. Haven't followed this up in a couple weeks, but obviously we had the Liberation Day, and this was the scary moment for Besant when we went up, or excuse me, down in the stock market and up on the 10-year right there. Okay, had a little bit of that repeat here in on the 21st of April. But now the stock market is going up again amid the tariff pauses and the negotiating against oneself that the United States seems to be engaged in, but art of the deal, I guess. 10-year still elevated, though. 4.3, 4.5. But the markets are back up relatively speaking, back to levels where they were, February, March 2025, before the real gambits began by the United States State Department. And Treasury Department, I guess I should say. Another one quickly. This is just the defense contracts of Europe. They continue to do very well. I'm not saying this is bad or good or whatever. Europe needs to do more. Europe needs to do more on their defense, and Rheinmetall continues to soar 236% on the year. Leonardo, Italian, I believe, as you might suspect, 115%. Rolls-Royce, 87% on the year. Obviously, there's been some announcements there. And then U.S. still flat to down. Raytheon, best performer. AECOM, next best. I don't expect less volatility, no matter what, how these calls might go with, or have gone with Putin and Trump. I don't expect the Russians to stop, and I expect as we move into the fall to be more volatility and more scares and more gambits from governments around the world, be it Russia or China or Iran. So why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't we want to prepare ourselves if Bitcoin, could hit this yearly change in the trend of maybe doing, maybe something like this, maybe doing $35,000 moves on the day. To me, it seems like it would make sense. Like I said, I'll try to, let me take some stuff off here. I'll try to even take this off. The actual price. We would get some better action, like I said, probably, or maybe more encompassing action if we go maybe looking at the 9-month change in the trend. You can see that it was clearly elevated here in the 2021s, the double top. Like a lot of daily moves that were, let's just zoom in so you know what I'm talking about. A lot of daily moves that were, say, 4,000, 5,000, 4,000, 2,000, 3,000. A lot of daily moves that were clearly at the top end of this range, suggesting that the daily price is just so elevated. There's so much interest. There's so much adoption, enthusiasm, liquidity you can use, but I don't even think that word really matters in this context. It's just more of a boom that you can see that roughly these hashes, and again, the breaks in these hashes are negative numbers, so they can't show up here on log scale. But you can see that these hashes, the top end of them are just higher compared to like here during the crypto winter where we're lower. These green hashes are much lower in this range. So we're well elevated here. More of a spike here really in 2017. Here's more, suggesting that smoother top. Perhaps it will be, again, this sort of a smoother, more elevated top in these hashes as we move out to the end of this year. And a couple days where, again, we have spikes that will hit this red line, this number 3 of a $30,000 daily move, which really, according to the trend line, is what it would take for a year for this stuff to develop over the price trend. So another arrow in the quiver, so to speak. I think this is something we'll be able to look back on or look at over the next few months and see, how this compares to projecting a top. Very few days where this price actually hits this number. And of course, it's not always at the top, right? It's like this here, we're moving towards the top. It didn't call the top, but it's very close. It's very suggestive about what's happening. And just to say it again, I don't believe, I'm not going to be disappointed if it happens, but I don't believe in all money supplies around the world collapsing, everybody just scrambling into Bitcoin. I mean, that suggests much more difficult things for more people around the world, and perhaps almost inevitably war, which everybody wants to avoid at this point. And we are in very dangerous times because we already have active wars and people want to avoid more wars. Of course, all that could happen, but history suggests, and governments' knowledge of history suggests, that they're going to do everything they can to avoid that. So liquidity for businesses, buying treasuries. Yeah, you could have the crack up boom. You could have the inflationary crack up boom. It's always possible. But if that would happen really worldwide across the scale and everybody moves into Bitcoin and it's hyper Bitcoinization, again, I'm not going to be sad about that because I'm long Bitcoin. Do your own research, but I don't see that happening. I see volatility, extreme moves towards the the boundaries of these trends. In this case, hitting the yearly change of the power trend. But I just don't see the crack up boom yet. And like Steve Hanke says, it's impossible to predict anyway. He studied this stuff all his life. He doesn't have an indicator. And he looks at inflation a lot differently than I do. He looks very hard at, Latin American inflation and everything relative to the dollar, FX rates vis-a-vis the dollar. How much did that change? Kind of using that as a main driver in his inflation metrics. That is in price inflation metrics. He has always said, and he's not a fan of Bitcoin still, as we know. Check our interview with Steve Hanke we did a few years ago. Still, nonetheless, he is a scholar of inflation, and there's just no metric that can predict the crack up boom. It could happen worldwide for all the major currencies, but I don't see that. So a different way to look at the power curve, basically. One more, I wanted to look back. So we told you that we talked about how this $7,000 kick, which happened on February 8th. Can I get it without zooming in? No, I got to zoom in. Talked about how the $7,000 kick on February 8th. Actually, more than $7,000. It was no, 7,100. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. The $7,000 kick in price on February 8th. That's above the yearly change. We talked about how that you got to go out well into the future to see a daily power change of $7,000. Let's look back at 2021 and see what these were forecasting. So here again, this is $1,000 change, $1,000 change, or 1,500. Let's say 1,500. All right, we hit that a few times here in 2017, or extended above it. Let's look now at the daily trend. When did we hit 1,500? Hit it here in 2038. All right, so 2038 minus 2017. Roughly 20 years. So here we were 20 years in the future on a couple days. That is like extreme in the future, right? The daily's more than the yearly. And here in 2021, we were close to 40 years in the future, right? Because we're all the way out here. Yeah. No, yeah, close to 30. No, sorry, close to 30 years. So 30 years in both cases, actually. Did I get that right? 2021. Yeah, 2048, 30 years. And then here, 2017 to 2038, 30 years. Yeah. So that's another interesting way to look at it as well. What I'm saying, again, is that the upper ends of these green hashes, that is when the daily is just a huge number. Let's compare that to how far in the future the power trend would project to see, it's another way to sort of judge maybe the tops or the extreme moves. And that's a 30-year in the future thing, right? So the daily back in February 8th was only $20. The actual trend line daily. Sorry, not to mix my definitions. The trend line daily price change, $23. In 2021, the actual price change was 40. It was under 40,000 on February 7th. $46,000 close on February 8th. So it's a $7,000 change. You have to go nearly 30 years in the future to find that. All right, from basically 2020 to 2050, let's just say roughly. And it's the same. It was the same in 2021. It was the same in 2017. So another way to look at it. Maybe I can try to chart that. That will be a different looking graphic, but that's interesting as well. All right, guys, I got some things to do. I don't see many comments today anyway, so thank you for watching. Let me know, please, if you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe. Let me know if you want to see other stuff similar to this. Have a great day. Take care.